All right, podcast, because wow, this shit was harder than I thought. I'm gonna apologize up front because like I wanted to make this like a quick snappy video that kind of talked about excuse me. Yeah. Welcome back to the identity booth that has been converted from a regular video to a podcast because this topic was getting a little bit too difficult for me to talk about in the sense of a snappy video because the identity booth is a great thing for me because it's a podcast format which allows me to talk without any real coordination in the sense of go list by list and have something direct to give you. But like I was trying to give a rundown of the talk, and let's just like start from the beginning. I guess the talk is something that is predominant in minority families. The talk is a conversation that you have as an adult with a younger person, kind of explaining to them that the world is out to get you and this is how they do it. Like there are certain things you can't do. There's certain neighborhoods you can't walk in. There's certain when you're dealing with police, there's certain ways you have to talk to them because like your skin color is a weapon. And this is a concept that is oblivious to young people, especially when they have a very diverse community where racial tension isn't high. Like I think about how I was raised and just, man, how fortunate I was going to school in Illinois and TF North and how like I never saw that, I never saw that racial concept, and it sheltered me in a sense, but it protected me, but it also gave me the initiative to look deeper into it. There were situations in our school that happened that didn't have a race attached to it, which I'm grateful for. But man, coming from Africa and my parents not really having that ability to have to talk with me didn't hurt me because I had other people step into those positions. Coaches, especially at the college level. I went to HBCU. I mean, every coach there was prepared to have that talk with their players. Like they gave us the rundown. More importantly, friends and older people that I hung out with helped give me insight into that. But now being 30 and looking at that situation, the movie, When They See Us, that is basically a Netflix special about the Central Park 5 done by this lovely director, Ava Duvernaymade. I think that's how you say it, Ava Duvernaymade. Let's see what the computer says. Free game. Just use your computer to talk to you. Oh wait, I don't have my speaker's not on. Ava DuVernay, her picture's up. She's a great director, and this show, as I haven't seen it because I actually had to study the Central Park 5 case for Innocence Project case that we basically use as a measuring stick to dictate like what is junk science and what is a prosecutor supposed to do and what is a public defender supposed to do and how is science going to be used to help the forensic world. And the thing about When They See Us, it really framed a situation for me that I see way too often. Are young black kids not knowing how to talk to police? And the best way to talk to a police officer when you're a young black kid is just don't ever talk to the fucking police. And this is a message that is going to people who at one point I looked over, who are now bringing kids into this world, or people who are older than me have kids, or a child who doesn't know what the talk is. The talk is about how to survive in America and be black, period. It's important for you to have this talk with your kid, and as important as it is for you to have this talk with your kid, it might be difficult to do because you don't know where to start. So I'm going to just run down some things that I jotted down. I'll put emphasis and context into certain situations that require a little bit more nuance. But for the most part, this was just too much of this was a robust topic that was just, I didn't feel deserved to be cut and chopped up and have silly sound effects. Like, it's serious. And I think you should definitely, take time. If you got your kid with you, I'll probably bleep out all my cursing. So this will be kid friendly, because if you don't know how to have the talk with your kid, I don't have a kid, but I have tons of experience in getting people in this topic. So as someone you probably trust or know, hey, how you doing? Hey kid, how you doing? Glad you're here. Like, share, subscribe, because your mother or your father didn't do it. And that makes me angry. But in all seriousness, let's run down this list of things you have to know. The first things first, if you're under the age of 18, you're considered a minor. You do not, besides the fact of you even being a minor, you don't have to talk to the police. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to say anything. Now, remaining silent is different than complying. If you are being told to do something by an officer, you have to follow that, unless you feel that is going to put you in an unsafe predicament. And you have to remember, when you're dealing with an officer, you are a weapon, not because you have one, but because of the color of your skin. So, example, this is a great video. If I'm going to find it, I'm going to put it up. There's a video of an officer who walks up to a car, has his weapon drawn on this young black man, and he tells the young black man to reach into his vehicle and turn off the car. The young black man says, no, that's a setup, and he knows it to be true, because there's also another video of an officer pulling over a young black teen, telling him to get his license and registration, then shooting him once he does it. Officers they're not your friend. They're not here to help or protect or serve you. They're here to assert or enforce crimes that will generate revenue for the city, state, or federal government. That is it. And if they have to put you in the dirt in order to acquire that money, they will. They have no problem doing it, and there's a long history of them doing it. It's not a tough decision for them. Honestly. So, first things first, don't talk to the police. Just don't. It's not for your benefit. And in the event you have to talk to an officer, you should only do it when you have legal representation. Legal representation isn't your mother. It isn't your father. I cannot stress this enough. Your name is your most powerful tool, because officers have a system, a pipeline that is designated. For all you parents, most of your kids go to schools where there's a resource officer. These resource officers have access to all the school's pertinent information when it pertains to this kid. So every time this kid is probably late, every time this kid has detention, every time this kid is late or does something wrong or gets written up, that officer has access to it. It's just another layer of evidence they can use when they pull this kid over on the outside of school. They get the names in school, they get the trends of behavior in school, then they look for them on the outside and try and implicate them in crimes that resemble similarities. That is what officers are ostensibly taught to do. Put two and two together and hope they match, even if they don't match in the first place. The Central Park 5 case taught me anything, that junk science exists. In 1990, they thought that looking at two pubic hairs and comparing them was enough to send 5 kids to jail for 15 years, 14 years. That is crazy. That just 2 hairs. I have gotten people out of jail for being convicted of the bite marks in a bologna sandwich. That's called junk science. But because it can be justified, they'll use it, and they'll do anything they can to use it against you. So the best way to avoid even putting yourself in that predicament is just not even talking to them. And I hear a lot of people kind of like bring up the fact of, well, not talking to them isn't really an issue, because sometimes things happen or are out of your control. And you're absolutely right. So let's move on to that topic. What happens if you're caught by surprise, or an officer has a weapon drawn on you and they give you instructions? Falling back to the previous story, don't make any sudden movements, don't run. Here's a list of people who were shot while running from an officer. Here's a list of officers who got in trouble for shooting somebody in the back. There's a discrepancy here. It's a clear one. And it's not by accident, because the officers have a term, a phrase that gives them more protection than any body armor could ever give them. And is, I feared for my life. That sentence, that phrase, grants them the ability to kill without any repercussions. I feared for my life, when you go through police documentation, is one of the most used phrases to get police officers out of trouble, because they can do anything they have to do in order to protect their life, as long as they feel they are innately in trouble. And remember, they're always going to be justified in their belief, because they believe our skin color is a weapon. So you have to be careful. If an officer tells you to reach for something, you tell that officer, no, I do not feel safe. If an officer tells you to get on the ground, and you cannot get on the ground without putting your hands down or keeping your hands in plain sight, you do not get on the ground. You tell that officer you can't. You have to be cognizantly aware of the ways they will try and get you in a predicament where they can put you down. Because the easiest way to win an argument is not to argue at all. Because if you're dead, it's my word against nothing. And I'm always going to win. So we have that going for us. So now let's talk about like knowing your rights. So this is super important to the extent that your kids need to understand what to do when an officer does approach them and is approaching them just talking bullshit. Just like, let's get this out of the way. There is no such thing as a good cop. There's only one good cop. His name is Officer Norm. He's out in Little Rock. If you're not in Little Rock and his name isn't Officer Norm, he's not a good officer, period. I don't care if he's your brother, he's your sister, or anything, because precincts are infested with horrible officers who are doing horrible things. And no one ever makes a notion or says anything to put them or pull them into the light. These are still human beings, is what I'm trying to get at to. And human beings who have power, unchecked power, tend to abuse it. That's just how it goes. I don't know why, but it's just how it goes. So if an officer is good, they have to prove that to you. It's not given. Just like respect, loyalty, anything like that. If they want something, they have to first reciprocate that. And for the most part, I'm willing to take my chances. In fact, I'm willing to take a 78% chance that they're probably not good, because that's what statistically speaking, that's the range. That's your chances of being shot by an officer given a split-second decision. Your kid should never use their names. If you're a minor and you're being asked to give your name, always give the adult parent name. Never give your name to an officer. Always give your mother or your father's first and last name, because that will signify to the officer who is trying to interrogate you that you are not this person, that you are not a legal guardian, that you are not of age, that this is your legal guardian, that if you have any questions for me, I'm not going to do it unless it's in front of them. You asking for your parents is not a defense. And if an officer asks you what your phone number is, your phone number should be the 1-800 number to the public defender in your community, in your city. You should never give your name or phone number or address to an officer. If they ever ask you for this information, the information you should be giving them should be the information to the public defender's office and their name and phone number. The child should know these things. You have to teach them this thing. Every kid knows their phone number. Every kid has this. This needs to be something they have memorized, because That is the only way you are ever going to know something's happening to your kid. The amount of time that a police officer can detain you, it varies throughout the community and country, but they can detain your child, and that's just the amount of time that you do not know what is going on to your child. So put them in a situation where they can immediately tell you they need help, because any officer that gets information about a person who wants to question or detain somebody, and the questions that they're asking are not being answered because they are requesting a public defender, requires paperwork. It requires a paper trail. And that's something that officers don't want to deal with. They want to be able to say you did something and book you for that thing. They don't want to have to deal with a public defender and explaining the rules and regulations and having them being held accountable. Any position where an officer can be held accountable is a position that you want to be on, because that's the position that they're trying to avoid. Make it hard for them to get you. Any question being asked of you, such as what is your name? What are you doing here? What so-and-so this? Something happened over there. All you have to say is, am I free to go? And the officer will be like, no, you're being detained. And then all you need to say at that point is, for what crime? If they do not state a crime, you ask them again, am I free to go? If they say no, you repeat. What crime am I being detained for? And if they give you some bullshit, which they normally do, saying you're impeding an investigation is not a crime. They do not have a right to hold you to investigate something, to investigate a suspicion. That is not your problem. They can figure that out on their own. It is not your job to provide that for them. And these are not like tactics that I'm just like throwing at you. These are things that I've tried. Like, I've beaten numerous tickets and violations and things of that nature that I was probably guilty for, but because they didn't have the ability to talk to me or provide evidence that they wanted to acquire from me, which is crazy, they couldn't do anything about it. That is the cycle you keep. Am I free to go? Yes, walk away. No, what crime are you suspecting me of? If they cannot give you a crime, am I free to go? After the third time of doing that cycle, ask for your lawyer. Ask for your lawyer. Tell them to call your lawyer. Tell them you need a supervisor. You continue to give them a barrier between you and them. Continue to create a system where they cannot say it is their word versus yours, because that is the worst case scenario for you, especially being a minority. Because for some strange reason in this country, even though we are a country that imprisons our population the most, police are glorified here. Police are not good. Like, I don't get that. In such a sophisticated country, we have officers killing their own civilians at a higher rate and imprisoning our population at a higher rate than anyone else in the country. That is mind-boggling to me. And if it's possible, I think I touched on this before, just try and record. If you have your phone out, just the voice is good enough. Every phone is just a flip up and a click there, and you can get your recording out. I think like the iPhone, if you hit the off button twice real quick, or if you hit the Android phone like 5 times like that, power button 5 times, it'll automatically start recording. These are features that have been put in place to keep you safe, so use them. And like, this is just like a rundown. Like, I really didn't understand how to like have this conversation with my people in a short form way. Like, I might have to do this video again in the near future, and it'll be a little bit more polished then, but it's just too difficult of a situation right now for me not to be throwing this out here for you guys, because like, we're in a predicament where the Central Park 5 happened in my lifetime, and that's shocking to say. Like, Donald Trump was harassing and persecuting these kids and has yet to apologize for it, and he's president now. Like, this is a dude that said, yeah, death penalty. That's crazy to me. And this talk just needs to start. It doesn't have to be perfect, as this podcast is probably proof of it. It just needs to start. The conversation needs to happen to the extent that your kid understands the magnitude of the situation. Your kid needs to understand that, kicking it and having a good time this summer is definitely going to be important, but police officers are on the lookout, and they're on the lookout for kids. They are targeting these kids. And then you as a parent, I know this is cliche as fuck. I said I wasn't going to curse. You need to know where your kids are. You need to know who your kids are hanging out with. You need to know who your kids really are. And don't sit here and bullshit it, because your kid is bad as shit, but they're not bad enough to be shot dead to rights. And as weird as this conversation, or as you're thinking, oh, Hero, you're blowing too much. You really think I'm fucking with you? God damn it. Stop cursing here. You really think that this is a game? Tamir Rice was sitting in a park by himself in an open carry state and got shot in under 2 seconds. Think about these kids who were out here having the water gun fight and how they were minding their own business and no one called the police, but the police still showed up and they did this to them. But that's what they goofy asses get for showing up to a place they don't belong, because these are nothing but a bunch of kids having fun. And if they were white, there'll be no problem here. I know it might be difficult for you to have this conversation, for you to try and figure out what's the best way you can handle this, what's the best way you can do this. And it's just something you have to do, because if they don't understand that the officers are out to get them, if they don't understand their rights, if they don't understand what it's like outside in the real world, that's a failure on you, and they don't deserve to suffer for that. So sit down, have this difficult conversation with them, because you want to know what's more difficult than having to talk with your kids? It's planning a funeral.